Hello friends and welcome back to Broken BJJ. I'm Kenny and today I want to talk a bit about training partners, how we choose them, how we talk to them and how we can make sure that we are protecting each other when we're rolling. Obviously this is going to be more important and more of a pressing issue for people who have disabilities, which is what the focus of the channel is. But this applies, I think, to everybody because just about everybody in jiu-jitsu will be training with some sort of injury at some point. And protecting your body and protecting your partner's body is a big, big part of training jiu-jitsu in a healthy, safe, positive way. So one of the first things that happens when you go to jiu-jitsu, one of the most intimidating things is that moment of choosing a rolling partner. If you are a brand new white belt going into a class that's full of colored belts, it can be very, very intimidating, and you often feel like the last person picked for teams in school. You're often just sitting there waiting like a wallflower for someone else to invite you to train with them, and that can be a very intimidating thing. As far as that goes, obviously, that does reduce with time. It will get easier the more you get to know people, and generally speaking, it's not as big a deal, I think, as it seems at first. But for people who have some sort of disability, there is an extra level of filter, an extra kind of layer that you need to put in place because you don't want to train with somebody who is going to be a risk to you. You don't necessarily want to be with somebody who is very big, strong, and clumsy. That's one of the real fears, and it's one of the reasons that I try to avoid, if I can, training with some of the bigger, newer white belts. It's not that I've got anything against them. They have every right to train. But for me, because I have certain fragilities in my body, there's a risk that somebody who's not in great control of their own body uh, is going to be a risk to me. And I have to think about protecting myself. And as well, if somebody is a lot bigger, a lot stronger than me, I'm only a white belt myself. I'm not necessarily able to protect them in the same way. So I would always recommend finding somebody who is close to your own size, or ideally somebody who's a bit smaller in those when you're just first getting into training, when you're first getting into rolling. While I'm on this point, I would just like to say something else. Those big, strong, clumsy white belts often get referred to in the jiu-jitsu community as spazes or spazzy. And I want to say we really need to get rid of that word, folks. For those of you who don't know, it is a shortening of the word spastic, which is a word that used to be used to describe people with cerebral palsy. Now, it does have a specific medical definition, and, if a doctor uses it in that context, I'm not going to be too hard on them. But we all know, because it's used as an insult in jiu-jitsu, that it's an insulting word. Uh, let's not use it. Let's find another word for people who are that bit wild, that bit uncontrolled, and that kind of clumsy way that a lot of new white belts are. It's really not a good word, and we really need to move past. So certainly where possible, I would recommend, if you are somebody with a disability, somebody who has maybe recovering from surgery or some other sort of injury, then look for some of the higher belts to roll with. Although again, this is something that you also have to be a little bit careful about. If those guys are training for a competition, or they're, really pushing to get to the next level of their game, then maybe working with someone like you isn't ideal for them. There are different people who are training for different purposes, who are training at different levels in every gym. The people that I look to train with generally are first of all, the more experienced people, the older people, the people who are perhaps looking at teaching rather than competing as the major focus of their jiu-jitsu. I hope, at least, that for someone like me, that I can actually be beneficial to somebody who's learning to teach, because they are going to learn a bit about working with somebody who's got certain limitations. And that's something that, as they progress in their jiu-jitsu teaching career, they are probably going to run into more than one person in that situation, and hopefully a bit of experience with me will have given them just some insight into how they need to deal with future students. But the most important thing, I think, is learning how to talk to your partners, because your partner doesn't know you, and your partner is not responsible for your training. Your partner is responsible for working with you for that one class, or for that one role, if that's what you're doing. So their job is not necessarily to protect you primarily. Obviously, they shouldn't be reckless, but that's not what's at the top of their mind. So you have to bring that up. You have to be the one to say, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but I have a problem with my knee, I have a problem with my hip, I have a problem with my shoulder, my elbow, my neck, whatever it is, and ask them to be somewhat careful. This can be as simple as, for example, when I had my frozen shoulder before I got my surgery, I would say to everybody, by the way, just so you know, my shoulders don't work properly. Please don't try an Americana me. And if you're going to put me in an arm lock or a shoulder lock, then please don't, wrench it. Please give me time to tap. And then, of course, it is up to me to tap early. It's not up to them to stop their jiu-jitsu just because I'm not taking responsibility for myself. It is up to me to say, okay, stop. We have a problem here, if there is some sort of problem. And it's up to me to tap early if I feel that I'm somehow... Now, having said all that, I do think that all of us in the jiu-jitsu world might do well to start making this just a habitual thing that we do, where before we train with somebody, before we roll with somebody, we say, hey, is there anything I need to know about your body? I think there are so many of us who are carrying injuries of various kinds, people who are recovering from injuries, people who have had surgeries, people who have chronic problems from years of training. There's everybody in the gym at some point is going to have some sort of physical issue that needs a little bit of extra attention. And I think it might be worth all of us just taking the time to, before we roll, say, hey, is there anything I need to know? And then we can always go into each roll with an awareness of what our partner is dealing with. I think that would make life a lot easier, especially for people who do have disabilities. It can be frustrating and quite difficult sometimes to always be the one to bring up the fact, hey, I have a problem, you can't train at 100% with me. If it became something that we just naturally asked, and everybody had an answer saying, well, just don't hit me too hard here, or don't push too hard here, I'm dealing with a sore wrist, oh, well, I hurt my neck last week, try not to stack me too high. Those kinds of things, I think, would all just be a little bit easier for everyone. And that, ultimately, is what we're all aiming for, is to get the most efficient, most effective, least risky training experience that we can. Jiu-jitsu obviously can be very risky. There are real dangers when we train. 99% of the time, those risks are 100% manageable. Most of the time, we're not going to do serious damage to any of our training partners because jiu-jitsu is, the gentle art. And we're not likely to do a lot of damage. But for that 1% of time when we might potentially do some damage to somebody, isn't it better that we know about that we're prepared for it, and that we're doing our best to avoid hurting our training partners? That seems to me like just an obvious way to deal with things. So to sum up a bit, I would say first thing is don't be afraid to talk about your limitations. It's your body and your jiu-jitsu. You need to be responsible for looking out for number one first and foremost. But number two, I would say always be listening to your partner. Always, if you can, ask what you need to know, how you can protect them, how you can help make their training experience better. If we all look out for each other in that way, then it makes it a lot easier for all of us to look after number one. So do try that, I think, and let me know down in the comments how you get on with that. Or if you're somebody who has a disability, who's recovering from an injury, tell us how you talk to your training partners about this. I think it's something that we can all learn a wee bit from. So do please help us out that way. But that is all I have for you this week. So thanks again for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. It helps grow the channel. Every click helps. So please do that. Please share this around with your friends. If you have training partners who have disabilities, let them see this. Let them get involved in telling us how we can help them better. And talk to people about this. Talk to people in your gym. Find out what people think about this from their perspective. I think it's something that we can all do that little bit better on. And it's something that if we do all get better at, will make for much longer, happier, healthier lives in jiu-jitsu. So thanks once again. Have fun at training, and I'll see you again next week.